Good morning on this July 8th, 2016, a live edition of Gike Scott Game on the Rivers board, and we have a solid hour of content coming your way here on the station, also on the live stream, always with live music, probably local music. I'm waking up this morning still 24/7 at riversedgepgh.com, and I'm taking a different tack this morning, at least to start the program. And by the way, you can follow me on Twitter and Facebook, Matt Gajtka, MattGajtka. I apologize for my voice being a little bit lower. Maybe it sounds a little bit better. Who knows? Because of summer cold I've been fighting off over the last couple of days. Maybe you picked it up on my West Coast trip. I cover the Pirates for DKPittsburghSports.com, so I was out in Oakland and Seattle, changing time zones, changing sleep patterns. I think that leaves you vulnerable from an immune perspective. So bouncing back from that, and then I'll get right back out to the left coast for the All-Star game. San Diego hosts the event, and I'll be out there from Sunday through Wednesday for DKPittsburghSports.com after covering the start of this Pirates-Cubs series this weekend. But I mentioned a different tack, and I feel it's appropriate after the events of Thursday night in Dallas. It feels a little strange just firing right off into the sports talk. And way back when, a couple of centuries ago, Karl Marx said that religion is the opiate of the masses. And lately I feel like sports has replaced religion in this way, because it does provide distraction and entertainment and maybe sedation as we move through our lives and deal with difficult news like we've seen not just last night, but of course whenever there is any type of real-world crisis, there is, at least for me, an internal debate. How much do you still give significance to sports, to entertainment in general, I suppose, which is intended ultimately to maybe not be a distraction, but to be a pleasant filler in the free moments we have between our jobs and providing for our families, seeing our friends, connecting with people, whether it be from just a pure employment perspective or from a recreation perspective. But there is that outside entertainment that is more prevalent than ever, easier than ever to come upon. And while I believe that's a good thing, I've devoted my career to this medium, to the sports realm. I think at times it can take away and it can distract us negatively from dealing with issues in the community. It can distract us from just absorbing what goes on. We can easily say last night, instead of following the crisis in Dallas when 5 police officers were killed and when several others were shot, you could just switch over to MLB Network or ESPN and pretend like it's not happening. Or if you're on social media, you can just stick to the normal patterns that you have as a sports fan. So when tensions boil over, like we've had this week, and who knows what the motivation was at this point, but likely that it's connected to the slayings of 2 black men this week by police officers. So we're seeing these racial tensions especially come to a head in America. And I've made my career in fun and frivolity, and that's what I call sports at all times. But it does feel especially frivolous in times like this. And it's all well and good to make a career in whatever people do value. And sports is a big part of our society. You could argue even too big of a part. But it's all well and good when we're in times of peace and normalcy. But it does feel rather meaningless when you bring these real-world issues, and occasionally they can bleed right over into the sports world, as we had earlier this week when there was news from the Chicago Tribune. This was Tuesday afternoon, and I'm not with the Pirates this week, but my colleague Jason Mackey was, and he helped report on the accusation coming out against Jung Ho Kang, the Pirates' third baseman, sexual assault. And he is not a suspect in the case officially. He is a person of interest, according to the Chicago Police Department. But I wouldn't necessarily call this a real-world crisis like I would the shootings in Dallas last night, or the previous, as I mentioned, killings of people by police officers, apparently unprovoked. We don't know yet, but it has caused significant pain and suffering in several communities around the country. I wouldn't put Gung's accusation in that category, but it does have the same effect on belittling the games, teams, and the leagues and the players that we follow and ascribe so much significance to. And I'm not complaining, just saying that's a statement of fact. It does, when news takes precedent, it does push sports to the back pages. When occasionally it can move on over. It can take the front page. It can be the biggest story that everyone's talking about, that's trending on social media, that is getting the most clicks on whatever website you prefer to visit, whether it's ours at dkpittsburghsports.com, whether it's here on the River's Edge when you want to listen to sports talk. And I do promise we will get to more of that in depth as this hour goes on this episode of Guy's Got Game. But in times like these, you do take a step back, or I do at least, and wonder, is it even appropriate to discuss some of the things that we usually do and to get all fired up over some of the things that we do? I think it's not a need to abandon any of the usual topics that we discuss, but in a way, it does remind of, this is maybe the prime example of this phenomenon over my life. It reminds me of the aftermath of 9/11, when so many sports media voices vowed to stop comparing our games to war and stop using metaphor and direct comparison for that. And that lasted for a while. I think we're better overall in the 15 years that have passed since 9/11, almost 15. It'll be that milestone in September. I believe we have gotten a little bit more cautious about that, especially as our warlike activities, our armed conflicts have continued in the Middle East. And of course, we do continue with drone strikes in other parts of the world, too. So a nation constantly at war, and I think that will be a state that we will be in for quite some time because of the threat of international terrorism and all of that. So I'm glad that we have stepped back from using things like war in the trenches. I know it does come up, especially in football, for whatever reason. It seems to be our primary war game. It's the one that, well, I suppose you could argue, does most resemble a traditional war like we used to know it, not the modern war that we have now. As I mentioned, with technology making things a lot more different, but taking territory and that sort of thing, that is especially significant in the sport of football, and that is where I think we continue to see most of those battle metaphors and things of that nature, which I would say we would be better off leaving behind. Not that these games and seasons aren't terribly important to the people who take part in them. This is how they make their living. Like I mentioned, sports is how I make my living, so it is very close to my heart, and it's not something that I'm going to just throw away. But we need to keep it in mind that it's so easy to get wrapped up in just sports only, just staying in that lane. And a lot of times, and I've discussed this on this program before, people like myself, or people who make their careers in sports, athletes, coaches, executives, they are told to stick to sports and not range outside of the that lane, to not range outside of that comfort zone. And maybe it's not a comfort zone necessarily for the person who is in it, but it's for the people who are on the outside. That's how they choose to define people. And we like to put people in categories and shove them off in this direction. Well, this is a sports person. This is a news person. This is a politics person. We're not served by those types of categorizations. And to create more well-rounded people, I think is a priority of our education system. It always has been, and I think it always should be. Not that there shouldn't be a focus on vocation, but this is why I think it is important to have history classes, to have current events classes be a huge part of curriculums at the high school level and at the college level. And because it makes people aware of what's going on around them. And no matter how important it may feel to you that the Penguins won the Stanley Cup, it's more important to your life what goes on in local city government. And, of course, we have platforms on this radio station to discuss that. Brian Crawford does a wonderful job on River Talk in that area. But it's crucial for all of us to understand these issues and to, well, in an election year, I think more of us are aware of those issues. A national election year, certainly there are local elections and things that might even have more relevance to you right where you live each and every year. And we're constantly going through election cycles in that way. But we should take advantage, I think, of politics being more in the news to be better informed, to have an idea of how we are mixed in with the whole power dynamic and where we stand and all of that. So sports will have its place, and it does have its place, but we need to keep it in its place. And it spills over into so many aspects of life, and it's so easy to get wrapped up in entertainment, not just sports. Get wrapped up in video games, in movies, in streaming entertainment, however it may be. The internet has really changed things in that way. You can not even step outside the house and have a pretty entertaining afternoon and evening at home and not engage with people at all. But how is that making you a better citizen? How is that making you someone who understands what is going on in your community? So everything in moderation. That goes way back. I cited Karl Marx earlier in this episode. I'm going to go back to Aristotle for that one. That was his thing, the golden medium, the finding a balance in life. And I think when you see sports figures reach out into the community and try to help out, whether it be at a local food bank or start a charity, they're understanding that they have a platform that they can take advantage of and can parlay into something that makes real-world significance, that makes a difference out there besides just making people happy or upset with the result of the latest game or the latest playoff season. They can reach deeper and they can go into an area that otherwise, if they were just a random 20-something or 30-something, they wouldn't have that platform, because sports does provide that. And I am encouraged when I see athletes like LeBron James, like I just saw the Steelers' Cameron Hayward, the defensive lineman, speak out against violence. It's not a controversial stance by any means, but in a lot of ways it is these days, because, as I mentioned, there are several cases of people lashing out against athletes who take social stands, and we just had perhaps the greatest in a lot of ways in this area, Muhammad Ali, pass away, where he took a stand against the Vietnam War on religious grounds. He frequently alluded to the racism that he grew up around in Louisville and that continues to perpetuate to this day in our nation. He was always unafraid to speak about that, and that's so important. That's such a rare commodity to not care about backlash. And I know there's fear out there that we will be shouted down, and it will happen, especially these days with Twitter and social media. Anything that you put out there is going to reach some sort of resistance if you have any kind of an audience. And you have to have the courage of your convictions and the strength of character to say, well, this is what I believe, and this is what I'm going to say. This is how I'm going to express myself. And in the end, that's the freedom we do have. And freedom of speech is, I think, a misunderstood concept at times. I know it is, because people seem to believe that you could say whatever you want and it's not going to affect your employment status or how you are regarded in the community. That's not the case. Look at, well, for instance, going back to Muhammad Ali. He was at times ostracized from the community because of how he expressed himself. The general community I'm talking about, especially white America. And at times he was controversial. At times that put him on the outside looking in. But I think history takes a favorable perspective on people like that. And if you can overcome the discomfort of the moment and realize that you're a part of something bigger, that does help. That has helped me at times. And this week was an anniversary of sorts, not a happy one for my family, for my wife's family especially. On July 7th, 2011, up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, 4 members of her family were killed in a domestic violence dispute in an incident that boiled over, and essentially a loved one was unhinged, was psychologically unstable, and it was part of the biggest mass shooting in Grand Rapids history, one of the bigger cities in Michigan. So that has led our family to go on a crusade of sorts against domestic violence, of helping people find help who are in need of it when their loved ones are dangerous to them, are hazardous to their health and to their life ultimately. So we have used a 25K run in Grand Rapids as a conduit for running for a cause, and another example where sports can help in this way. And even though I started this segment by saying that sports can distract, ultimately sports can be a way to reach people, whether it be through your charity, through a cause that you have that's near to your heart. And it's been the case in my life, and it can be the case in your life too. And we have to be careful not to equate sports to these causes that we care about, that we feel are important, but it can be a help, and it can reach out. And that's one of the things that I like most about being in the sports world, is you can connect with people that otherwise you would not connect with, whether it be people from another ethnicity, from another country, from another background. For instance, if you like baseball, it doesn't matter what your skin color is, what your background is, or what your economic status is. We have that thing in common. It's like music in that way. So these things are entertainment, but they do connect, and they can humanize all of us. So it's key to keep them around. It's key to keep them in their place. And in the end, they can all work for the common good. We'll take a step away here on Geick's Got Game, and we will talk some baseball. I'll have a special guest coming on, Tim Williams of PiratesProspects.com. Thursday was an important day for the Pittsburgh Pirates out in St. Louis. Their top prospect made his debut. Tyler Glasnow will discuss him and so many of the youngsters who have transformed this Pirates roster in 2016 as they hang in there for a wild card berth. This is Geick's Got Game, and I'm Matt Geica on the River's Edge.
Hey, this is Mike Sasson. If you've been searching for something to do with your pathetic life, guess what? This ain't it. But it'll kill about an hour. It's the Mike Sasson Show, starting 10 a.m. on July 19th. Going to 11. It's going to be a lot of fun here on the River's Edge, a new kind of radio.
Well, that'll wake you up early on a Friday morning. Matt Geica here live on the River's Edge. If you're listening after the fact, that was Solar Burn. Or if you're listening live, that was Solar Burn with a real caffeinated song to get us all ready and rolling. Before we get into the second segment here on Geick's Got Game, I'd like to announce something exciting. The Mike Sasson Show. Local comedian Mike Sasson premieres Tuesday, the 19th of July, live at 10 a.m., and we're happy to have him on the River's Edge, found at riversedgepgh.com. This is a new kind of radio, and it's time for Pirates Talk, exclusively here in this second period of the program. And I can think of very few people out there who I'd rather talk about the Pirates with, and I can think of no one out there I'd rather talk about Pirates prospects with than the gentleman on the line with me from Bradenton, Florida, the owner and proprietor and lead writer at PiratesProspects.com. His name is Tim Williams. Tim, thank you for joining me. I know this is an early hour for you, but you're up for good reason, aren't you, down there on the Gulf Coast of Florida?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Matt. Got a pretty good game to watch this morning. Nick Kingham is going to be making his first rehab appearance, so got to see Tyler Glasnow make his debut last night, and now see Nick Kingham get back on track. Hopefully, get to the point where he can eventually start thinking about his pro debut sometime in the future.
Nick Kingham, one of several Pirates pitching prospects that, well, maybe not Nick necessarily, but he should be someone that the Pirates are going to look to, I guess, supplement their major league roster. But we've already seen plenty of that this season, Tim, and you just mentioned maybe the number one case of, or the number one example of the talent infusion that has come up from AAA for the Pirates this season. Tyler Glasnow starting in the majors for the first time Thursday afternoon at St. Louis. He joined Chad Kuhl, Stephen Brault, and Jamison Tyone as legitimate prospects starting for the Pirates this year, beginning their major league careers. And we'll start with the most recent one, Tyler Glasnow. And he allows 2 runs in 5 1/3 innings at Busch Stadium, gives up the home run to Randall Grichuk, and actually walked the first batter, which I thought was rather fitting considering the issues he's had with bases on balls throughout his pro career. But he settled in nicely and got into a decent rhythm, and I don't know if I would have bet on him being the 4th of that group that I mentioned being called up this year, but he did make it. And what did you see from him? You've watched him so many times over his career, but you got to see him on a major league mound for the first time. How did you think he handled the whole situation?
Well, I liked what I saw from him. I liked the approach. The thing that I liked the best was that he was using his curveball early in the count. He was using it when he fell behind a couple of times. There was one 2-0 pitch to Matt Holliday where he threw a curveball, dropped one in right down the middle for a strike, and used that to battle back. And that's really the key for him, and that's something that he wasn't doing consistently at the AAA level, was using that curveball as a weapon early in the count to get some early strikes, and not just relying on the fastball, because his fastball, the command of that pitch and the control as he's trying to work the corners, it isn't always the best, and he can fall behind with that pitch. And if he doesn't have another offering to help him get back into the count, then he's just going to be in for a long day. You're going to see a lot of walks. So there were a few situations where I felt like he was heading towards, another potential walk. He had that first one in the first at bat, but he didn't have another one until the last plate appearance, I believe it was.
Yep.
And I think he really avoided some by, righting the ship, throwing that curveball, bailing himself out of a few counts that were starting to go bad, and really just getting himself back into things. So that was the biggest thing for me, seeing him showing confidence in that pitch early and also executing it a few times. There was that home run where he did leave one up. It didn't break as much, and it was a little bit flat, but for the most part, the pitch looked good.
Tim Williams of PiratesProspects.com. Subscribe there, PiratesProspects.com. I am a subscriber, by the way, and I enjoy the content in depth from the farm, and especially relevant this year with so many prospects either having made their debuts or perhaps on their way, in the case of AAA first baseman Josh Bell, who continues to tear up the International League. With Glasnow, Tim, what type of is he just a pure power guy? What can we look forward to as he presumably makes more starts, whether it be right away at the major league level or somewhere down the road?
Well, I think it's the control really is going to be the deciding factor at this point. Long term, he's got the biggest upside of really anybody in that rotation, possibly even more than Garrett Cole, but of the guys who have come up so far this year, he's got more upside than any of them. But the interesting thing about that is, his control, what I was just talking about with the curveball, using that early in the count and commanding that pitch early in the count, that's the stuff that he needs to work on to get to that upside. And he's a little bit more risky right now because you never know which version you're going to get of him. You might get the version that we saw a little bit closer to yesterday that doesn't give up a lot of hits, that, all the stuff is pretty much for the most part on. You might also get a version who doesn't have the best fastball control, doesn't have the curveball command, and gives up a lot of walks, runs into a lot of problems. So he's very much, hit or miss right now, whereas somebody like Chad Cole, somebody like Stephen Brault, you're not going to see the highest upside. You're not going to see them go out and absolutely dominate for one start, but you are going to see them go out and give you pretty good outings almost every single time. So those guys are a little bit more steady, I would say, at the moment. Whereas with Glasnow, you could see an outstanding start, or you could see a really bad start. It's one extreme or the other.
And speaking of extremes, I did a stats-oriented piece on Glasnow's minor league numbers, and Tim, I couldn't find a single comparable for him in terms of the level of strikeouts per nine and the walks per nine that he has had as a professional. He's above 10 strikeouts per 9 innings, which is outstanding for a starting pitcher, especially. But he's walked around 5 per 9, and I couldn't, outside of Randy Johnson going back, and Randy's control problems were even worse, believe it or not, when he was younger in his career. But could you find anyone that you would be comfortable comparing him to? I know that's often a fraught thing. We don't want to put undue expectations on a young guy who's just starting out. But could you find any who were, in that ballpark, pardon the pun, with both strikeouts and walks?
Yeah, it's really difficult because, first of all, not many people strike out the amount of people he strikes out.
Yep.
So you're eliminating a lot of people right there. And then, of the guys who do that, his walk total has been pretty high in the lower levels. It's gotten better a little bit, but took a step back this year. And not many people overcome that type of control problems to go on and become a really good player. So you're once again eliminating a lot of major league players by looking at the walks as well. So it's the reason I think he can have success with that approach, having the historical high walk total, but also the dominant strikeouts, is that I think the walks will eventually settle down. They've always been kind of a product of his big frame, and every step of the way, since I've started covering this, the thing I've heard is that tall pitchers, especially 6'8" pitchers like Glasnow, it takes a long time for them to really get adjusted to their height, get adjusted to all of the moving parts, and eventually it does start to click. They do start to get more comfortable. They stop running into problems with their mechanics where it's messing up at one point along the way. You saw that with Randy Johnson, and you never want to compare anybody to a guy like Randy Johnson, but he had control problems even coming into the majors, and then eventually that settled down. I believe he was 6'10", so a couple inches taller than Glasnow, but you hope that's what's going to happen with Glasnow. You hope that eventually that control is going to settle down. He's going to start commanding the fastball. He's going to get used to pitching in his body and using that 6'8" frame. And if that happens, you're talking about one of the best pitchers in the game.
I went deep down the Randy Johnson rabbit hole the other night. He walked more than 6 per 9 as a 27-year-old with the Mariners. So it took him a bit of time, and I know that Tyler and the Pirates are hoping it doesn't take him that long to figure it out. But the upside is there, certainly, with the stuff. And another pitcher for whom upside, I think, is a prime word is Jameson Taillon. He's on the 15-day DL right now with shoulder fatigue, but he and the Pirates don't seem too concerned about that. I heard an interview with Ray Searage yesterday as I'm home from the beat this week, but saying that essentially they plan to shut him down for a little bit, give him a breather with his injury history. But, Tim, I've been blown away by his ability to use that two-seam fastball, which we never really talked about that much coming up through the system. He threw it a lot in AAA, or he started throwing it in AAA, and now it's a key pitch for him. Is that a game changer for him, because it gives him another option besides the straight four-seamer, besides the big curve that we all know and love? How much of a difference can that make for him as he tries to make an impact right away?
Well, I think that I really like what Taillon has done in the last year or two with his mechanics. He really cleaned it up. He got his delivery to the point where he was getting the ball down a lot more, and that wasn't the case early in his career. it wasn't always the case even before his Tommy John surgery, where he was pitching down in the zone, having some good downward movement on the fastball. He always had the ability to sit 94, 96 and touch higher than that, but the ball was flat, and that made him really hittable. So he got to a point where his four seam started to get down a lot easier, but he also had that two seam fastball, and he had it in high school. The Pirates took it away when he came into pro ball, and had him focusing on the four seam, focusing on getting that pitch down. They gave him the two seam back once he reached Double A, and he's been working on it as a situational pitch. But in his final start in Indianapolis this year, he reviewed. I talked to him about it. He reviewed the video and the results with pitching coach Stan Kiles down in Indianapolis before that final start. They realized that the two-seamer was actually getting some really good results and probably should be tried as more than a situational pitch, probably should be tried as a primary fastball. And so they did that. He got good results in that final start in Indianapolis. He realized just how good the pitch was, because that's a pitch where, if the four seam, if you're getting that down, if you're getting that down with good movement, the two seam has a lot more movement. And so, the fact that he can throw it also at 94, 96 miles an hour, he doesn't see the 2 or 3 mile an hour velocity drop off that other guys do switching to that pitch. It makes total sense that he would go with that offering over the four seamer as his primary fastball, because you've got a pitch that can get down in the zone, has a lot more movement, and has been getting some pretty good results for him so far. So I think it's a really good switch for all those reasons, and he seems comfortable with the pitch, and so it's a really good offering for him to use to set up his other stuff.
And looking at PitchFX pitch values, that two-seamer has been his most effective pitch this season, just looking at some of the early samples from his start in the majors. You mentioned Nick Kingham there, who is rehabbing Tommy John. He's another tall right-hander that could eventually be in Pittsburgh. But two more quick things before I let you go, Tim, and to go watch Nick get back after it. Trevor Williams, how far along is he? Will we see him in Pittsburgh, do you believe, this year?
I think we could. I think that they have so many rotation options now that you're more likely to see Trevor Williams as a bullpen guy. I do think that he has the chance to be a starter in the future. He's got a good sinking fastball, can hit the low 90s with that pitch. He's still working on finding a good breaking pitch, a good out pitch. But I think that he could definitely come up and help the bullpen as a long reliever, or even as a short situational guy when they need a ground ball. Certainly Jared Hughes has been in that role in the past, but he's struggled a little bit. So I think that they could call up Trevor Williams at some point and have him, hopefully ease into that role. He's done a pretty good job so far in Indianapolis out of their rotation, but with all the guys they have coming up from Indianapolis, it's going to be really difficult to find a rotation spot for him. So I think that if you do see him, it's going to be out of the bullpen.
Williams, one of the five that I think we all identified coming out of the spring, that dream rotation at AAA with Glasnow, Tyone, Chad Kuhl, Stephen Brault. Those first four have all made their debuts already this year at the top level of baseball. Maybe Trevor Williams sometime later this year. Let's talk position players, though. Josh Bell, as I mentioned, killing it at the plate, both sides of the plate, in fact, flashing some power from both sides. And I'm wondering what else he has to do. I know defense continues to be a struggle for him at first base, just maybe because of the instincts that aren't quite there for him, a year and a half into his transition at that position, or 2 years almost. But what do you see as maybe the one thing holding him back? Is it simply John Jaso and other guys like David Freese performing well at the big league level?
I think it's exactly that. I think it's Jaso and Freese performing well. I know, Jaso had a really rough month of June, but I don't think the Pirates are going to be quick to give up on him just because of that. There were a couple other hitters who did have a rough month last month, and Jaso seems to be coming out of it there. I would like to see Bell come up at some point this year, even sometime soon. and start to ease into that role a little bit and start to see a little bit more playing time at first base. Maybe not necessarily taking over the position outright from Jaso, but getting to a point where he's comfortable at the major league level, where he's eased in so that you can go with him as the starting first baseman. I think that if you didn't have John Jaso, if you had a guy who was completely struggling all year, Bell would have been up by now. He would have been up probably in mid-June, if not, a little bit after that. And really the thing that's holding him back at this point is the defense. He does have some stuff to work on there. He was always an outfielder. He's been a first baseman for the last 2 years, last year and a half. And that was such an easy transition for Jaso. I mean, he's done a fantastic job with it. But I think what helped him was he was a catcher. He was used to where the first baseman had to be. He was used to the infield alignments, whereas with Bell, it's a total change for everything. He wasn't used to the infield. He was only an outfielder. There's a different throwing arm angle from the outfield, so he had to work on his throws as well, and then just getting adjusted to how the infield works, where you have to be with every play, and then also the whole idea of receiving a throw. That has been the thing he's been working on lately. Is just when to extend out from the bag to receive the throw to make sure that you can still move around if the throw doesn't go straight towards you, and learning the angles that the throws are going to be coming in on. I think that's a lot easier for a catcher who's used to receiving 95 mile an hour fastballs and 87 mile an hour sliders than it is for an outfielder who hadn't played the infield his entire career.
Yeah, that's the one thing that comes up no matter who I talk to about Josh Bell, from Neil Huntington on down. It's that outfield to infield, a challenging thing because the game speeds up, and Bell's still working on speeding up to that level defensively. But offensively, he looks very, very strong. Tim Williams was very, very strong in this segment. Thank you, Tim. As I mentioned, I know it's early, but I hope you got your coffee alongside or whatever you might need, your Red Bull, what have you, and have a great day down there. Enjoy the game. Enjoy watching Nick Kingham back on the mound, and we'll look for more from you at PiratesProspects.com.
All right. Thanks for having me on, Matt.
That's Tim Williams. I'm Matt Geica. We'll step aside on the river's edge and be back for a little more baseball talk, but we'll also take out a cliche, which I am wont to do on this program each and every week.
Stay clear of the streets, for God's sake! The timid and the fearful drivers are every bit as bad as the aggressive drivers. Nobody in Pittsburgh knows what a right-of-way is. I go down the road and I just sing this song, the gas is on the right, the gas is on the right, hi-ho the highway, yo! The gas is on the right.
Get educated with Brian Crawford, live Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 10 a.m. here on the River's Edge.
Third period time on Geik's Got Game. I'm Matt Geica, your host. Every Friday, we had an abbreviated show, which I recorded from the road last week, about a half an hour, but hope you enjoyed that even without the video content. Got that done from my hotel room in Oakland, California. It was a cool trip to see two new cities, although I saw much more of Seattle than I did of Oakland. The Coliseum is kind of out by the airport in Oakland, where the Athletics play, and the building is dilapidated. It's worn down, and the town can be a little bit rough. There can be some violence there, so I tried to stay indoors and just shuttle back and forth from the ballpark from my hotel. But Seattle got out and about quite a bit, and it was just a shame that the Pirates had but 2 days against the Mariners, 2 games in 2 days against the Mariners, and then I stayed part of the following off day, explored the Pike Place market a bit with a friend of mine who writes for Pirates Prospects, in fact. His name is Sean McCool, so he's one of Tim's army of minor league baseball reporters and Major League. We've had Alan Saunders in here quite a bit. He's a regular guest. He is the Pittsburgh Pirates reporter for PiratesProspects.com. So not only does that site cover the minors, it also covers the major leagues, and in particular how some of these youngsters are adapting to the top level. And if you're thinking there's a parallel between what the Stanley Cup champion Penguins did with bringing up youngsters and injecting youth and what the Pirates are doing now, I would say yes, there are some parallels there, just for the fact that there is the talent is knocking on the door, and especially in the case of the Pirates, we've been waiting for some of these guys for so long. Jamison Tyone, drafted in 2010. Tyler Glasnow has been one of the top prospects in the game, top 100 certainly, and then top 20 the last 2 years for the last several seasons since he broke out with the West Virginia Power in Low A, his first season of full season ball in 2013. So we've heard about these players for a long time. Josh Bell, the last prospect that we mentioned on the previous segment, he was drafted in 2011, convinced to go to the Pirates instead of attend the University of Texas, where he had a sizable scholarship. So it's a slow burn in baseball. It's not like hockey, where for many people, I'm sure, this spring was the first time they'd heard of Tom Kuhnhackl or Connor Sheary or Scott Wilson, or you go on down the list, any of the guys that were called up. Not Brian Dumoulin, this was his second year, but prospects aren't quite as big of a deal, at least not minor league prospects in hockey. There's just the one level. There are a couple levels of minor league hockey, but where the real prospects are is usually just the AHL, the one level below the National Hockey League. And there isn't that culture that glorifies and celebrates prospects, sometimes to a fault, that we see in baseball, but hockey more is the case, in which if you're a big-time amateur player like Sidney Crosby, you go right to the show and you get it done from the start of your pro career at the top level. That's just how it works. I'm not sure exactly why. Well, I have some ideas. Baseball is a game in which some refinement is needed. It's more than a game where you can succeed on raw physical tools. Not saying that hockey is all about that, but it can give you the edge right away. Whereas in baseball, yeah, you can run, you can jump, you can swing the bat, you can hit long home runs in batting practice and in college or high school, but no guarantee that's going to translate against major league competition. And speaking of baseball, if you're listening on this Friday, tonight you're in for a treat. Well, maybe, because if you're in the Pittsburgh market, you won't be able to get MLB Network's presentation of Pirates Cubs. Mike Emmerich, the voice of hockey on the NHL, on NBC, I should say, the Emmy Award winner, Doc, will be with Bob Costas in the booth at PNC Park. Mike Emmerich, as you may know, is a massive Pirates fan going back to his youth growing up in Indiana when he picked up Bob Prince and KDKA AM way out in the countryside. That signal does carry quite far, even to this day, maybe not quite as far as it used to, with some of the raw power taken away from it on the AM side. But that is how Doc got into the Pirates. He's been a Pirates fantasy camper. I got to speak with him multiple times at Bradenton this past year at spring training, which is a real treat for me. He's one of my role models in this business, and Doc is so enthusiastic about his Pirates, he will get a chance to call regular season baseball on a national broadcast with Bob Costas. He'll do some analysis and also some play-by-play, as far as I understand. But as I mentioned, it's not available live in Pittsburgh. Root Sports has the local rights, as they typically do, unless it's, say, ESPN picking it up or Fox for a national broadcast. So you'll have to, I guess, catch the highlights afterward on MLB.com. I'm sure there'll be plenty, and maybe a rebroadcast on MLB Network if you do get that. But I'll be down at down at PNC Park at the press box this evening for the game, and hoping to bump into Doc and see just how fired up he is. You know how excited he gets for hockey, and I think he might even be a level above that for calling a game of his childhood team, the Pirates. So Mike in the house as the Pirates start a key series here against the Cubs. A little bit more on that in our final segment. But we are in the third period, and it's time to, you know what, I'm not going to kill the cliche anymore, because I feel like, first of all, I'm not killing them. They are hanging around, but I can propose a ban. So I'm going to go with ban the cliche for the name of this segment from now on. And maybe in the vein of what Pirates broadcaster Bob Walk says when he talks about banning the designated hitter. I'm not on board with that in the least. I think that DH could be a quality concept for both leagues, national and American. But be that as it may, that's neither here nor there. The cliche that I'm hoping to ban this week is war of attrition. And I mentioned war metaphors falling out of sports somewhat, I think, particularly since 9/11. That was something that many sports media voices promised to do, that they would no longer compare sports to war directly. And, of course, we still do that quite a bit. And it's, in some cases, unavoidable, especially in some of the more physical sports. I mentioned football, but hockey among them too. But war of attrition seems to have a longer life than most. And I think it's just, for some people, fun to say. I'm a big culprit too. I've used it in the past. And attrition as a concept just means that things wear down over time. World War I was called a war of attrition because you just had all this manpower out there for both sides in the European theater. And the thought on the American side especially, and our allies, was that eventually you just keep throwing firepower out there, you keep at it, and the opposition will break down. And that is how it is applied in sports. You could even say in the sport of baseball, not one that's particularly combative, at least outside the batter-pitcher matchup. That is an attrition battle. That is a war of attrition. And because of just how long the season is, and you have to hang in there. And if you do, the person and the team that lasts, that stays alive, so to speak, that stays viable as a competitive entity, that is the one that succeeds. And that is particularly the definition. That is essentially the definition of attrition. But we can use the word attrition without putting war in front of it. And this is a case where you hardly ever hear the word attrition without war of in front of it. So that is the cliche that I will attempt to ban this week. It's two needless words at the front. Number one, you can just say attrition simply and get your point across. That is one of the reasons I don't like cliches, is they add unnecessary words to our communication, and just for the sake of wordiness, I suppose. But also the comparison to real war is the main reason why I propose to ban this cliche. So war of attrition, put that one on the list as one of many that I'm attempting to put out of use. And I'll let you know when I have my first success. But I do enjoy railing about it here on this program on Geiks Got Game. We'll be back for the final segment in just a moment. Overtime coming up here on the River's Edge.
Would you be interested in developing conscious choice? Would you be interested in creating reactions rather than waiting for one to come? Would you be interested in combining serendipity and synchronicity? Would you be interested in making 1 + 1 = 3? Would you be interested in finding out about full impact mindfulness? If so, I challenge you to join myself, Jim Ellermeyer, a cognitive behavioral health therapist, every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. on the River's Edge, where we will challenge you to allow us to help you help yourself to fully participate in your life. Let the adventure begin.
Overtime, let's do it on Geiks Got Game, and my voice has bounced back. I don't know what's going on. As I mentioned, fighting through some sort of illness. I'm at the back end of it, so I hope Brian Crawford behind the board isn't worried about catching anything. Usually at the back end is when you're not contagious. That's how I understand most of this. So, which is scary because typically when you're at the front end of things, you don't really feel that bad, but that is the time when you can spread your disease the most. So there you have it. It's how the human body works. Two things before I wrap it up. Comedian Jay Cooper, one of our friends here at the River's Edge, he returns to the station every first and third Saturday, live at 10 a.m. with Brian Crawford. So call it a River Talk Extra situation there. Jay Cooper back, and we're happy to have him, happy to work it out. Saturday, first and third Saturdays of each month, so every other Saturday he'll be in. And we anticipate that. Also, you can become part of the River's Edge local music scene by becoming a patron on Patreon. That's Patreon. And you can find the donate link at the bottom of riversedgepgh.com. So even though I read out the how to spell Patreon, you can find it at our website. Again, riversedgepgh.com. Become a patron. Make a good investment, as they might say, on Funny Money, another one of our many talk programs in addition to the music on this station. And I'm pleased to be back in the studio. Next week I'll be on the road, so you'll get another mini edition of Geiks Got Game as the Pirates season moves on into its second half. It's been a year since I started this show, believe it or not. And, oh, wow, thank you. A very gracious applause from Brian, making me feel welcome in the studio. It has been terrific, and this is a rare chance for, I feel in media these days, everything is boiled down to little sound bites, little tweets, everything's smaller. So to get an opportunity to expand, and like I did in the first segment, just talk like a normal person instead of having to distill things down, I think there's still room for that, and there's still a call for that, being able to be long form, whether it be writing or spoken word. So this is a very fulfilling experience for me every time I get to do it, whether it is here or, as I mentioned, on the road, in which I don't have all this wonderful production surrounding me. So there you have it. But if you've been listening lately, not only do I ban cliches, I also present the final number before I sign off for another week. And this week's number is 6, as in the number of consecutive comeback wins pulled off by the Pirates this week. And they finally lost a game, as I discussed with Tim Williams earlier in the show. Tyler Glasnow made his debut, the Pirates' top prospect on the farm, but the Pirates did not win in that debut, so a bittersweet situation there for him and the team. But a 7-game winning streak put them back above 500 and back firmly in wild card contention. And remarkably, after that first win in Seattle, the next 6 were all in comeback fashion. And the series in Oakland was almost surreal. I was out there, and the Pirates trailed by 2 runs early in each of those games, and it was like they were following the same script. And the A's were complicit. Of course, they weren't, but that is what it appeared to be, that the A's would strike first, and then the Pirates would strike last and strike best. And that has put them in a position now where they are 3 games out of the final wild card spot after taking 3 out of 4 from St. Louis. The most impressive win of that stretch was the last one. They were down 5-1 to St. Louis on Wednesday night in Steven Brault's Major League introduction, the lefty. Very personable young man. Happy to see him get a chance. But more importantly, he is a talented pitcher. That was Jeff Locke's night, I should say. Steven Brault pitched the previous night when he got down early in that game. And then Jeff Locke was the one who gave up the 5 runs. So he continues his erratic season, more good than bad, but the bad had been really bad. But it didn't matter that night at Busch Stadium when the Pirates came back. The 6 consecutive comeback wins, that's the first time that's happened in Major League Baseball in 3 years, and it's the first time the Pirates have done it in more than 30. So that gives you an idea of how rare this is. 3 years doesn't sound like that long, but each team plays 162, of course, every summer. So that's an opportunity, more of an opportunity than you have in hockey and basketball and especially football, to compile that type of a comeback record. And I often wonder, what's so thrilling and satisfying about the comeback? I always like the comeback wins more than any other when I'm rooting for a team. Is it the surprise factor? Is it the sudden flip of the script near the end? Is it that satisfying narrative arc? You have the beginning, you're introduced to the protagonist and the antagonist. The antagonist has the edge, and then the protagonist comes back and takes over. That's more of a literary perspective on it, but that has proven to be a very popular formula over the history of mankind in telling stories, so that could be part of it. Is it inspirational, as Pirates broadcaster Joe Block said a few times on Wednesday night when they came back, the Pirates did, from 5-1 down? Is it just we feel that it gives us hope if we're in a tough situation, that our team did it, they pulled it off, so we can do it too? However, to leaven that sentiment a little bit, comebacks are sexy, they are fun, but usually if you're trailing, that's not a building block for success. Most teams, when you come from behind, that's a good thing to do once in a while, but not a repeatable formula. So still, the Pirates have some work to do with their starting pitching, even with the bullpen being great, even with the offense continuing what has been a good season, rebounding from a really down period in June. They have had increased success. They've gotten back to where they were earlier this season. In the recent maybe 2 weeks, they have been quite good. You can factor in the fact that you feel like you stole a game. That can give you an extra psychological boost, but you don't want to keep falling behind. So that is still an action point, still an action plan for the Pirates in the second half, the unofficial second half, when they return from the All-Star break, and that is to get not just better starting pitching, but longer starting pitching appearances, because the bullpen's carrying quite a bit of the load. That was part of the plan this year, at least until some of these youngsters came up. But even with the young pitchers, you have to imagine they're not going to be able to go 6 and 7. They're still finding their way. And with the Chicago Cubs coming in this weekend to put a wrap on the pre-All-Star game portion of the schedule, you'd have to figure that'd be especially important. Jake Arrieta gets the start against Francisco Liriano on this Friday night. The Cubs are still well ahead of the Pirates, but the Pirates have cut that deficit to 8.5 games, and still 3 out of the wild card. That's held by the Dodgers. The Mets are right there, too. Those are the 2 wild card spots, the 2 wild card teams at the moment. Never too early to talk about that, particularly when you're trailing like the Pirates are. So I guess it's appropriate because they have come back several times in a row this month, and they'll have to continue coming back in the standings if they want to return to the postseason for a 4th consecutive year. This has been Geiks Got Game. I'm Matt Geika. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next week, reminding you that when the radio fades, you know life's moving fast. This is The River's Edge, and this is Geiks Got Game.